He had parked in the visitor's lot because he did not want to take a space from the families who did not know the grounds as well as he did. Isaiah Grant knew the grounds of St. Catherine Academy the way a man knows a place he has cared for through a long winter, not with ownership, but with a particular intimacy of attention. He had walked these paths at 7 in the morning when the campus was empty, and the June light was still horizontal, and the groundskeepers were turning the sprinklers off. He had sat in the parking lot through rainstorms with a check on the passenger seat of his pickup, waiting for the finance office to open because the envelope slid under a locked door didn't feel right for a matter this significant. He knew the school. The school did not know him. He had walked across the lawn in his best suit, a navy jacket he had owned for 11 years, kept in a dry cleaning bag between occasions, pressed and ready for exactly this kind of morning, carrying a bundle of sunflowers wrapped in brown paper. Naomi had told him once, in the car on the way to a school fair when she was 9, that sunflowers were her favorite because they were always facing the light, even on the hard days. He had remembered it the way he remembered everything about her, completely and permanently. Today was June 14th. Naomi Elise Grant would graduate today as the valedictorian of her class. He had been awake since 4. He had completed his maintenance shift at the hospital at 3:15, changed in the locker room, driven 40 minutes home, showered, put on the Navy suit, and left for the school by 7:30 to ensure he arrived before the seating filled. He was not a person who arrived late to anything that mattered. The campus was already populated with families who had driven from other cities, people with good cameras and silk dresses. The kind of crowd that gathered around milestones in the way that milestones attract people who want to be near something significant. The chairs were set in white rows on the lawn in the morning light. On the program, printed on heavy stock paper, the name Naomi Elise Grant appeared at the top of the graduating class list with the notation valedictorian printed in a smaller font beneath it. He was reading that notation when Vanessa found him. He heard her before he saw her, which was how it had always been. Vanessa had a voice that arrived before she did, a particular quality of presence that preceded her person by several feet. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We want to know what this story means to you. Isaiah. He turned. She was wearing cream, very well fitted, with pearls at her neck, and Richard Langley was beside her in a gray suit and the expression of a man who managed his importance. Rich was a corporate attorney who had been in Vanessa's life for 6 years, who had a client list and an address in a neighborhood that meant something to people who tracked such things, and who had developed the habit of speaking about Naomi's accomplishments in the first-person plural, as in, "We are so proud of what she's built." Isaiah looked at his daughter's mother. She had lines at the corners of her eyes now, the fine kind that accumulate honestly over years of expression, and she was still the person he had loved fiercely and completely and incorrectly for most of his 20s. Before they had run out of language for each other, and the running out had completed itself in a different way than either of them had wanted. "You're early," she said. It was a statement that contained many things. "I like to be settled before it starts," he said. Richard stepped slightly forward, the movement of a man establishing the perimeter of a conversation. "Isaiah, good that you made it." The tone was the particular warmth of someone who considers their generosity to be visible. "Of course," Isaiah said. "Naomi's had a remarkable year," Richard said. "The speech she's prepared is extraordinary. Vanessa and I worked with her on it over the last 2 weeks. She really—" "I should find my seat," Isaiah said. He moved toward the seating area. Vanessa fell into step beside him, slightly away from Richard, and spoke at a volume intended only for him. "Isaiah, we arranged a section for family. The program has a specific setup today. Naomi asked that the front rows be reserved for. It's complicated. I think it might be better if you—" "I have a letter from the school," he said. He said it quietly, without confrontation, the way he said most things. He took the letter from the inside pocket of his jacket and offered it to her. She looked at it but did not take it. "What is that?" "An invitation from Dr. Whitmore." A pause. "The principal." "Yes." She looked at the letter. She looked at him. The look contained several recalibrations. "Why would Helen Whitmore send you a personal—" "Isaiah." The voice came from across the lawn, precise and carrying. Dr. Helen Whitmore was walking toward them, 62 years old, with the brisk certainty of a woman who had run an institution for 20 years, and had earned the right to arrive anywhere she wished. She wore an academic robe over her dress, and the expression of something that needed doing. "I was hoping to catch you before it started." She reached him and shook his hand with both of hers. "We have your seat ready. We'll be asking you to join the faculty section on the stage platform. We want you at the front when we make the announcement. and Claire has the presentation materials organized. It will be brief, but she glanced at Vanessa with a neutrality that was extremely precise. It will be accurate. Vanessa said, Helen, what announcement? Good morning, Vanessa. Dr. Whitmore looked at Isaiah. Shall we? Yes, he said. He did not look at Vanessa as he walked with the principal across the lawn toward the stage platform. He kept his eyes forward. He carried the sunflowers. The truth, as truths tend to be, had been accumulating for years. Isaiah had been 24 years old when he met Vanessa at a fundraiser for a literacy nonprofit where she was working as an event coordinator. He was working 2 jobs then, maintenance technician at the hospital during the day, and a weekend electrical repair side business that he had been building slowly since the completion of his certification. He was not rich. He was not going to be rich soon. He was careful with money in the way that people who have been close to the absence of it become careful. Not anxious, but attentive, treating money as information rather than emotion. Vanessa had liked his steadiness. She had told him once that he was the first person she had been with who didn't need the room to perform for. He had been proud of that for years. They had married in a small ceremony at a church on the east side of the city. His mother, Evelyn, had worn a blue dress and cried at the right moments, and hugged Vanessa at the end with the complete warmth of a husband who had decided to love without qualification. Evelyn had been a public school teacher for 31 years. She believed in education the way some people believe in the physical laws of the universe, as something that did not require faith because it was simply demonstrably operative. You gave a child access and resources and the freedom to go as far as they could, and they went. When Naomi was born, Evelyn was at the hospital before the shift change. She held the infant with the authority of a woman who had held many children and knew the particular weight of this one. She has eyes that will go far, Evelyn said. She was looking at Isaiah when she said it. Don't you ever let anything close that door. Evelyn died of a stroke when Naomi was 3. Isaiah sat with her through the last night in the hospital where he worked, in the room that smelled of the particular cleanness of medical spaces, and listened to her breathing change. And when it stopped, he sat for a long time before he told anyone, because he needed to carry it alone for a moment before he shared it. He established the scholarship fund 8 months later. He named it the Evelyn Grant Education Fund and registered it as a private educational trust, which meant its operations were not publicly disclosed unless the fund chose to disclose them. He seeded it with everything he had saved in the previous 2 years, 11,000 ters, which was not much by any standard but was everything he had. He was the sole administrator. He retained a financial advisor, a woman named Patricia who had been his mother's friend, and who charged him nothing for the first 3 years. The fund's stated purpose was to support students in financial need at qualifying institutions. The first student it supported was his daughter. Naomi had been enrolled at St. Catherine Academy on a partial scholarship when she was 9 years old. The scholarship covered 60% of tuition. The remaining 40% was the responsibility of the custodial parent, which under the divorce agreement that Vanessa had filed when Naomi was 7 was Vanessa, with secondary financial contribution from Isaiah. Vanessa made the payments for the first 2 years. In the 3rd year, she had been 3 months late. In the 4th year, she had called Dr. Whitmore's office in November to request an extended payment plan. In the 5th year, the school had contacted Isaiah directly for the first time, because his name was on the original enrollment agreement, and because Claire Benson, the financial officer, had noticed that the payments in years 3 through 5 did not match any account she had contact information for. That was how she discovered the Evelyn Grant Education Fund. She had called Isaiah. He had explained, quietly and without emphasis, that the fund had been covering the shortfall. She had asked why he hadn't told anyone. He had said that the agreement was between his daughter and the institution, and that the source of the funding was a private matter. Claire had processed the psephantons. She had not disclosed the source to Vanessa or Richard. She had not been asked to, and she understood without being told that there were good reasons for the arrangement to function as it did. Over the following 5 years, the fund had paid for 8 months of shortfalls across 3 separate periods. It had paid for Naomi's junior year in its entirety, when the medical costs from Richard's hospitalization had rerouted household finances, and the tuition payment had simply not materialized. It had paid for the summer programs that Richard had enthusiastically described as his contribution to Naomi's academic profile, and that Vanessa had accepted gratefully, neither of them looking closely at the invoices. Isaiah had worked a 3rd job during 2 of those 5 years. He had taken electrical contracts on weekends in the evenings, on the days between his hospital shifts when other men would have rested. He had not told anyone about this. He had not complained. He had driven to the hospital in the dark and driven home in the dark and sent the checks. And when Naomi called him on Sundays, which she did reliably, the way she did most things, he had listened to her talk about her classes and her friends and the book she was reading, and he had thought, this is why. On the stage platform, he sat beside two faculty members who introduced themselves with the warmth of people who had been looking forward to meeting him. Dr. Whitmore had briefed them. They knew what was coming. On the lawn, Vanessa and Richard had taken their seats in the second row, which was front enough to confirm importance. And the gap between the second row and the stage was the entire distance of the misunderstanding. And for a moment, Isaiah felt the weight of it. All those years of checks and silence and early mornings, and the particular loneliness of doing something important that no one knows about. Then the processional started, and Naomi came through the doors in her white cap and gown, and whatever else he had been feeling became secondary. She walked with the composure of someone who had arrived at the moment they had been working toward. She was 18 years old, and she carried herself with a specific earned confidence, not the confidence of someone who had been told they were exceptional, but the confidence of someone who had done the work and understood what the work had cost and was still standing. Her eyes found him on the stage platform. She looked at him for a beat longer than she looked at anything else, and her expression asked a question that he could not answer from this distance. And he held her gaze steadily, which was all he could do. The ceremony proceeded through its formal components, the invocation, the administrative remarks, the class statistics, the scholarships announced, the awards. Dr. Whitmore came to the microphone at the 30-minute mark, before the diplomas. St. Catherine Academy was founded on the belief that education transforms lives, she said. That belief is only realized through the people who support the institution's mission with their own resources and their own faith. This year, we are recognizing a contribution that has supported one of our most distinguished graduates throughout her 10 years at this institution. On the program in the audience, there was a line that had been added that morning at Dr. Whitmore's direction. It read, "Special recognition, Evelyn Grant Education Fund." Dr. Whitmore described the fund. She described its founder. She described without excessive detail the years of support it had provided and the specific circumstances under which that support had been most consequential. She introduced Isaiah Grant. Vanessa was sitting with her hands clasped in her lap. Richard's face was very still. Isaiah stood. He did not have a speech. He had not prepared one because he had not expected this, and if he was being honest, he would not have wanted it if he had known it was coming. He stood at the microphone and looked at Naomi, who was looking back at him with an expression that would require years to fully read. "My mother believed," he said, "that the only thing worse than a door that's closed is a child who doesn't know it should be open." He paused. "I just tried to keep it from closing. Everything else was Naomi." The applause was the kind that comes from people who have been moved rather than people who are being polite. He sat. Naomi was called to the microphone 40 minutes later as valedictorian. She stood at the podium in her white gown and looked at the audience for a moment, long enough to locate her mother and Richard and her father on the stage and to make some internal arrangement of what she was about to say. She had a speech prepared. Vanessa had helped her draft it over 2 Sundays in April, and it was a good speech, articulate and warm, with a kind of formal gratitude that commencement speeches are supposed to contain. She had it printed and folded in her pocket. She did not take it out. "I thought success was about walking through beautiful doors," she said. "I thought the people who loved you most were the people who opened them. I thought the best thing someone could do for you was get you into the room." She paused. "I was wrong, or not wrong, incomplete." She talked about what she had learned in the past few hours. She did not explain it forensically. She explained it the way a person explains something when the understanding is still arriving, in present tense, in the voice of someone who is working it out. She talked about the difference between people who are visible in your success and people who are underneath it, who hold the weight of the thing from below, who do the invisible work of maintenance and presence and financial continuity, who sign the checks that nobody photographs. She thanked her mother. She was specific. She named the things Vanessa had done that were real, the interviews attended, the teachers met, the application materials reviewed. She did not perform gratitude she didn't feel, but she did not withhold what was true. She thanked Richard with brevity for the years he had been present. Then she said, "For years I thought love had to look impressive to be real." Today I learned that sometimes love wears work boots, misses the photograph, pays the bill, and still shows up with sunflowers. The applause was immediate. Isaiah sat with his hands quiet in his lap and felt something he could not name that was somewhere between the release of held breath and the absence of weight that he had not known he was carrying. He did not cry. Or he did very slightly, in the way that things that have been held a long time give way when they finally give, not with drama, but with the specific quietness of something becoming its true shape. After the ceremony, the lawn dissolved into the warm, overlapping texture of families. He found Naomi by the oak tree at the east side of the building, where she was standing with her cap in her hand and the diploma rolled inside it. And he walked toward her with the sunflowers, and she looked at them, and then something happened in her face. She had been crying before he arrived. He could tell. She had cleaned her face up, but the evidence was in the red of her eyes and the particular set of her mouth. She took the flowers when he held them out. She looked at them for a moment. "These are a little wilted," she said. "I've been holding them a while." "I know." She held them tighter. "Dad, when did you start?" He did not pretend not to understand the question. "The 4th year, when the payment didn't come through in November." "Was that the year Richard was in the hospital?" "Yes." She was quiet. She looked at the diploma. "I thought the fund was. I thought it was some program through the school. I never." She stopped. "All those years you never said." "I didn't want you to feel the weight of it," he said. "I wanted you to just go." "But I should have known," she said. "I should have known you were. You were doing the work," he said. "That was your job. Knowing who was paying was mine." She put the flowers down on the bench beside her and looked at him. This daughter who had his patience and something else that was entirely her own, a specific quality of seeing that had anything to do with him and everything to do with who she had become. "I thought you were somewhere on the outside of it," she said. "Like you'd missed it. Like it happened without you." "I was underneath it," he said. "The foundation doesn't show." She stepped toward him and put her arms around him, and it was not the careful, managed hug of occasions, but the full weight of someone who has understood something and needed to hold the person who was part of the understanding. He put his arms around his daughter and stood there in the shade of the oak tree, with the diploma between them and the wilted sunflowers on the bench, and the sound of the ceremony dissolving into ordinary afternoon. After a long time, she pulled back. She wiped her face without embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have let you know me better." "I should have let you know me better," he said. "I thought keeping the peace was the right way to love you. I was wrong about that." She nodded. She was still processing. He could see it in the way she was looking slightly past him, reading something. "Mom," she said. Not a question. "Yes, I have to talk to her." "I know. Will you?" "I'll be here," he said. He sat on the bench beneath the oak tree while his daughter had a conversation with her mother that he would not hear and would not ask about. He watched them from a distance, Vanessa's posture moving through several configurations, from defense to explanation to something that looked from this distance like the beginning of grief. Richard moved toward them at one point, and Naomi said something to him, and he moved back. What she said, Isaiah did not know. He thought it was probably enough. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When it finished, Naomi walked back to him and sat on the bench and put her hand through his arm in the way she had done when she was small. "She didn't know," she said. "I believe that." She thought Richard was supplementing. He told her. She stopped. "He was taking credit for what you were paying." Isaiah looked at the lawn, where families were still gathered in the loose, warm aftermath of ceremony. "That's between him and her, aren't you?" "It doesn't matter," he said. "None of it changes what happened." For a while, then she said, "The fund, Grandma's fund, I want to be part of it. After college, I want to help keep it running." He looked at her. "For the same reason you started it," she said. "Because some kid shouldn't lose their spot just because the check was late." He thought about his mother in the blue dress. He thought about the invoice on the passenger seat in the rain. He thought about Evelyn's hands holding a very small Naomi in the hospital light, saying she has eyes that will go far. "That's how a door becomes a hallway," he said. The fall came quickly after. The summer was a series of arrangements. Naomi's dorm rooms list, the orientation dates, the financial aid paperwork for her undergraduate program, which was on a full merit scholarship and therefore did not need the fund, which was a fact that Isaiah found deeply satisfying. They had done what they came to do. He drove her to campus on a Saturday in late August. The pickup was full, boxes of books, a lamp, the desk fan, a frame with a photograph of Evelyn. Vanessa had also come with her car, and they moved things in 2 systudes and arranged the room together without script or stage direction, just the practical organization of two people who understood what their daughter needed without needing to compare notes. Richard was not there. Isaiah did not know if this was Naomi's request or Vanessa's decision or the natural result of the conversation that had taken place under the oak tree, and he did not ask because the result was the same either way. When the room was arranged and Naomi had said hello to her roommate, and they were standing in the corridor with the empty boxes, Vanessa looked at Isaiah. "I didn't know," she said. "I want you to know that I didn't know." "I know," he said. "I should have looked closer. We all should have looked closer at different things," he said. "It was a long time. We got through it." She looked at him with something he recognized as honesty, the particular honesty of someone who is not managing their expression. "You were always the better parent," she said. "I'm sorry it took me this long to say that." He did not argue with it or diminish it. He simply received it. Be present for from here. That's what matters. He was about to say something else when Naomi appeared in the doorway of her room and said, "You're both still here." "We're going," Isaiah said. "One more minute," she said. She came into the hall and hugged her mother first and then her father, and then looked at both of them with the equanimity of someone who has made peace with a complicated thing. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping the door open." Isaiah looked at his daughter. "Always sunshine," he said. He drove home alone as the evening came in. The pickup was lighter without the boxes. The road was familiar, the kind of familiar that comes from driving it many times without noticing you're memorizing it. He thought about Evelyn. He thought about the night she died, and the morning after, when he had gone to work because there was nothing else to do, and the work was where he put things he did not know how to carry otherwise. He thought about the fund, and the checks, and the early morning deposit slips that had accumulated into something that now had a name and a future, and a person attached to it who wanted to extend it. He thought about being underneath, about the way a foundation works, how it does its job by accepting weight, by distributing stress across its surface, by simply being present in the place where everything else rests. You do not photograph the foundation. You do not give speeches about it. You lay it right, and then you let the house be built, and you trust that the house will hold. Naomi had held. She had held in ways he had watched from the periphery for years and had not been able to claim without diminishing. She had held because she was exceptional, because she was his daughter, because she had inherited something from Evelyn that was not teachable and was not purchased with any check, regardless of the amount. He had kept the door open. She had walked through it. That was enough. It had always been enough. He pulled into his parking space and sat for a moment in the quiet of the truck cab and thought, this is what it is, and it is exactly what it should be. Then he went inside. There are fathers who stand in the light and fathers who work in the dark. The ones in the light are easier to see, easier to thank, easier to include in the photograph. The ones in the dark do the work that holds the photograph up. The checks that prevent the loss of a seat. The early morning shifts that free the afternoon for pickup. The conversations with a child that contain the full truth without the weight of grievance attached to it. Isaiah Grant was not interested in the light for himself. He was interested in making sure the light reached his daughter. He signed the checks that nobody photographed, drove the miles that nobody counted, and did it for the same reason he had done everything since that evening in the small apartment, when Naomi had first been handed to him, and he had looked at her face and understood something about what he was supposed to do with his time. Vanessa thought she had won something when she structured the custody arrangement. She thought the visible investment, the school meetings, the applications, the credit she took in rooms where credit was noted, was the substance of what Naomi needed. She was not entirely wrong. Those things were real and they mattered. But she was wrong about the most important part, the invisible layer, the thing that kept the whole structure from collapse, was already in place before she arrived. It was there in the dark, in the November when the payment didn't come, in the rain, in the early morning and the late evening and the second and third job and the trust account and the name on a fund that honored a woman who had taught 30 years of children that a door, once opened, should be held. Isaiah had held it, and now it was a hallway,